This is Del deChant, the host of the Florida Food Forum and also the host of Florida Food Dialogues. This is a special edition of Florida Food Dialogues, and we are so lucky to have with us today Elise Pickett of the Urban Harvest in St. Petersburg, Florida. And she is an active and vital participant in the urban food movement, really the urban food renaissance. And we are going to turn over the opening part of our program to Elise so that she can tell us a little bit about herself and get us set up for the dialogue that will follow. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce Elise Pickett of the Urban Harvest in St. Petersburg, Florida. Elise, please.
Hello, everybody. They'll already introduce me. I'm Elise Pickett, and I am the owner, founder, whatever you want to call it, of the Urban Harvest. And I started doing this back in 2014, and I wanted to help people learn how to vegetable garden. I think it's a really important thing to grow some of your own food, and there's a huge knowledge gap in today's society. It's just not something that many of us have been brought up with and raised around. And so I wanted to kind of fill that knowledge gap for people and be there if they have those questions, to kind of overcome the hurdles in the beginning, learn the seasons and the pests and the whatever. Specific to Florida, that's definitely my specialty. That's where I was born and raised. That's where I've gardened since I was a child. But I'm really, and especially of late, you were kind of saying there's, a renaissance in, food and growing your own food. And I couldn't agree more. And especially this past year, I've really been branching out even beyond Florida and just trying to help anybody and everybody with the basics of vegetable gardening.
Well, that's exciting. Everything that I've heard about your work, and I'm just beginning to learn about your work, is so often the case with our Florida Food Dialogues, is it's a discovery for me. It's always an adventure. And I come upon folks, or we come upon organizations that are doing just wonderful work that we didn't know anything about. And then all of a sudden, there it is, and you've been doing this great, really large scale project, and as you said, branching out nationally. So we celebrate your work in that regard. Did you remind us again of just how long you've been doing it, and maybe tell us a little bit about kind of the growth process in your project? You told us just a moment ago about your branching out. Mm-hmm. Well, I think maybe we're interested in maybe getting back to maybe the main branches that you're branching off of now. So maybe a little bit about just how you got started, the first steps that you took to get the Urban Harvest started, and then maybe a couple of the turning points or major events that led you to where you are today.
Yeah, so I started this as an official business in 2014. So I've been doing it for 6 years now officially. But I kind of decided to start doing this because I had a lot of friends and family members that were coming to me asking me questions all the time. And it's because they saw what I was doing. They saw me harvesting and producing food, and they were intrigued and they wanted to know more. So I helped them. And it kind of came to me. I was actually reading an article at a friend's house in a magazine, and it was about a gentleman in New York City. I can't even remember his name. And clearly New York City is super urban, metropolitan, and he was determined to grow his own food. And he turned the bed of his pickup truck into a garden and drove around and taught people how to grow food and where it comes from. And I was inspired by that. And I was like, if he can, I can. I want to share my knowledge, and I want to help people through their learning curve in the beginning. So I decided to start the Urban Harvest. But I'm lucky enough, I do it full time now for about the last year and a half, almost 2 years. I've been full time, but it was not like that for a long time. I would say that was one of the biggest things, to just be patient and just wait it out. It was part-time. It was very hit or miss. It was a lot of extra work, but I kept doing it because I knew it was needed. And now that I get to do it full time, it's really evolved. I started doing, everything was local in the beginning, right? Because it was my comfort zone. I knew St. Pete. I knew the businesses around here. I'd network. I'd go to the farmers markets and stuff like that. And my sister actually kept encouraging me. She goes, "You should share your knowledge on YouTube." And I was like, I don't want anything to do with that. It's just not my scene. I don't want to be on, or not TV, but that just wasn't me. And she kept pushing and pushing, and I finally decided I'd do it. And it's been amazing, because now I'm not just meeting face to face with people in St. Pete. I've been able to help more people by branching out into that online format. So that was kind of a big turning point. Now I had, people on the East Coast, down in Miami-Dade, all the way up in the Panhandle. Now I'm able to help a huge amount of people. So that was a really exciting transition for me.
That's a lot that you're doing. And it just raises a lot of kind of follow-up questions and inquiries. The question that I have, you got started in 2014, and you're a for-profit organization, and questions that come up often from our community is kind of the technical aspects and the business aspects of getting started with a project like that. Many of the growers, many of the projects that we work with are either not-for-profits, or they're in some way aligned with the state government through the IFAS organization, or the various agencies of the state. So how does the Urban Harvest fit in with that?
Yeah, so I am an LLC, and I strongly believe, and I think not just necessarily for my business model, but I think for a lot of the education and food policy movement, there are places and absolutely time for the grants and the not-for-profits. But I also think that to keep things sustainable long-term, and to not have to rely on outside resources if budgets start to get cut, or a business closes down, I want to be able to be independent of that, so that I'm still able to carry on my mission regardless of outside input. So it was really important to me to build a for-profit model. And I also think that not just with educators, but also with farmers and growers, and food in general, I think is a very undervalued, or that there's that misconception of what it goes into growing our food and putting it on the shelves. And sorry about that.
It's okay. I love it. I love it. He's part of the show today. The pup is part of the show today too. We welcome him.
So it was really important to me to be able to support myself. I think that when people are willing, if they understand the time and the effort and the value that you're putting into a product or a service or their food, growing their own food, I think the true value of food is something that's often overlooked. So by me being a for-profit model, I hope to show that, time is worth something. And whether you're growing food or teaching people, I think that there is value in people's time, and getting back to that is really important.
Beautifully said. Your project then, as you've described it so far, is supplying food for people. You mentioned through farmers markets, and that presumably that's working through you doing harvests on a weekly basis and taking the fresh produce to the local markets.
I actually did that for a short while. I got into this starting wanting to teach people, but my concept, or the way that I understood or initially visualized my plan, was that education is not something people will pay for. So I need to have a product, i.e. food, that I would sell, and then my education, which is my passion, would be like what the food paid for, essentially, right? For me to take that time to teach. So I did do small scale commercial farming. I mostly did microgreens. I did a lot of leafy greens, salad mixes, that kind of thing. I sold to some of the restaurants and produce stands. Farmers markets I did for a brief while. They are very hit and miss. That was rough going because you're there so long.
Farmers markets are hard work too. I mean, you've got to be there and you've got to wait. You got to make sure the clients show up, and if they don't, this is another part of our story too. We have a special that we did in the Florida Food Forum about farmers markets, and they're extremely important, and yet for the grower they're extremely challenging because of the time that it takes for the grower to actually then be there trying to be a salesperson as well. So right. Your observation on that is good and important. So sometimes you do farmers markets, but then you also had done, or maybe are still doing, direct distribution to restaurants, you had mentioned.
I did, yes.
And are you still doing that? Is that still part of the package?
No, I actually transitioned away from growing commercially. So as I was teaching, I realized that even though it would take longer maybe to grow, I was able to do it part-time. So I transitioned away from that. I still clearly grow an abundance of food for myself and family and friends, but I transitioned out of the commercial side of things and I no longer distribute. And I'm still able to support my work.
Okay, and is the support then now coming largely through the educational endeavors?
Yeah, so I do classes, workshops in person before everything going on now, but now online a lot. I do the YouTube, which allows me to offer free content, but I'm able to generate revenue from my ads. So even though they're not having to pay for it, I am generating revenue from that. I'm doing things like Amazon Associates, where if people come to me and they're looking for the books that I learned from or anything like that, that generates income for me as well. And then I also do have a seed club, which
seed. You said seed club?
Yeah, okay. I do. I have a vegetable seed club, so that does help support my income. And it also, I think, is one of the things I'm most excited about. I just started this a year ago, and it was just something people kept asking for is what varieties actually grow here? Like, okay,
Right.
fine, plant beans in, September, but what kind of beans,
Right.
So it's just all feedback from the people that I've worked with and my clients and them, and they just really, to get through that initial learning. So I send out very specific to Florida, broken down into the regions of Florida, what to plant, when to plant, and the varieties. And I send 3 varieties of seed to their door each month so that they kind of have a continual harvest. And it also gets people to grow in seasons that they normally might skip over, i.e. summer, when most people say nothing grows and just call it a day.
Right, but we know
I'm able
better
to
than
send
that.
varieties.
We know better than that. We know there's summer crops that we can grow too.
Absolutely.
Elise, what's the source for those seeds? Are those seeds from your own garden that you've saved, or are they commercial seeds that you've repackaged?
So initially, when things were small, it didn't grow very quickly in the beginning, and I was able to supply my own saved seed, but it gained in popularity. So I do work always first. I have 3 friends local, and in addition to myself, that I'll source seed from. So I just sent out Ethiopian kale, and that was all locally sourced from right here in St. Pete. But there are varieties that I do not have enough space in. I will source from. I use Southern Exposure Seed Company a lot. They're focused on a lot of heirloom varieties for the southeastern United States.
I'm excited about this and your project, and that, to my mind, from a food system standpoint, is what you're doing is answering or responding to a deficiency in the Florida system and really in the food system in general, and that's locally sourced seeds. Now, you mentioned Southern Exposure, and I know about Southern Exposure, and they're very good. And they have varieties that many of the other seed suppliers don't have. Being obviously Southern Exposure, they have seeds that are more targeted to the southern part of the country. But even still, in my experience, and you can correct me or share your insights, not always from Florida. They'll be from the middle South often, South Carolina, North Carolina. Those are areas where it seems like Tennessee, Kentucky, that central part of the South, but not Florida. And that's just been my experience. I get peanuts from them. They have peanuts that nobody else has. They have black-eyed peas or cow peas that doesn't seem anybody else has. And again, it's very clear that these are southern crops, no question about it. That's great. But there still seems to be a deficiency in terms of Florida and Florida source seeds, especially this belt of Florida. We still largely rely on, not we, but the growers or the hobby gardeners are relying on seed companies to do it rather than building up a robust local seed system. So I just want to take a moment while we're on this one and note that projects that we're working on in Newport Richey, my home, include a local seed bank. So we have some local seed up here that we're going to be happy to share with you and share with your system if you're interested in that.
Absolutely.
Again, the whole idea is to get I won't go through all the different seeds that we have, but we have black-eyed peas and cowpeas. We have 5 different varieties of okra. We've got arugula, and we've got a famous Calabrese broccoli that we've been saving seeds from for almost 15 years. So we have a seed bank system up here that this is part of Florida Food Dialogues, but it's also a direct connection that I'm making with you regarding 2 projects, yours in St. Petersburg and ours in Newport Richey, to maybe integrate some of the seeds. So we'll do that off camera. We'll do that another time. But I just wanted to salute you.
I'm excited for that talk.
I didn't hear what you said.
I'm excited to have that conversation.
Oh yeah, we'll have that, and we'll get together and we'll continue our discussions about the various projects that you and I are both interested in, where there's potential overlap. But I do want to stress, and this is for everyone that may be listening to this, is save your seeds. Save your local seeds and replant them again and save them again in the next season and the next season, the next season. That's what we're losing on a massive scale. We can be good ecologists, good environmentalists, good organic growers, but if we're still buying our seeds from commercial outfits, including not-for-profit commercial outfits, still, like, we get a lot of our seeds from Seed Savers Exchange, which we like very much. They're organic and heirloom as well. Those are all great, but the key to going forward is developing the local network, the local farms, the local growers, and the local seed stock. Our okra, our broccoli, our arugula grows much better, much stronger than any of the commercial seeds that you're seeing, because it's used to growing in this area. And St. Petersburg and Newport Richey, I think, are close enough that there is a very similar climate zone that we're in, but that's changing too. Okay, that's terrific. Let me ask another question and have you share.
Well, just to speak to that too, real quick, because I'm a firm believer in everything you just said, and that was something that was really striking in COVID. Everybody panicked, right? And they went and bought a bunch of seed. Well, the seed companies ran out of seed. What do you do? Yep. And I had serious discussions with the people in our area, and we were trying to meet that demand as best we could and sharing seeds and, getting it out there. But that's also something with the seed club that I do. Like, it's not just to give them seed. I teach them how to start seed, because so many people rely on plants, but also how to save seed. And I really agree that is almost not more important, but it's just as important as learning to grow the food itself.
It is. And again, we want to underscore that. And frankly, it's not talked about that much. There's not enough communication that's being done on the importance of seed saving. There's a great video, I'm sure you're familiar with it, but I'm going to share it for the sake of the audience, the people that may be listening to this in the future. It's called Seed, the Untold Story. If you've not seen that video, listeners and viewers, you should see that video. It really gets at what Elise and I are talking about right now, and the importance of developing locally sourced heirloom seeds. Let's build up the local seed systems, because as Elise mentioned, and I underscore this as well, when the COVID crisis hit, a lot of people wanted to start growing. And so they did buy out the seed companies, large-scale commercial money-making operations, but also the not-for-profit seed sources. Seed Savers ran out of seeds. The only way we could get seeds from Seed Savers for our network here in Newport Richey was through the seed racks that we operate. The seed racks were able to get some seeds that the individual buyers were not able to get. But even in that case, there were huge gaps in what was available. And if we had a robust local system, then that challenge would not have occurred, or it would not have been as severe, because we would have had those local seeds, and we were able to meet a lot of the seed requests we had with local seeds. Another strategy that we shared, and you may have shared it as well, and I don't know if this is part of the Urban Harvest Project, but we also have a seedling operation that we do, in which we are starting the seeds, and the only seedlings that we're selling, that we're making available to folks, are ones from our own local seeds. So we have peppers and okra, we have some cowpeas that are going, we have some dragon tongue beans. We won't go into more detail on that, but that also helped meet the need, or meet the demand that people had during the COVID crisis. They wanted to grow something, they didn't know what to grow, and we had the seedlings available that people were able to just buy directly from us, as opposed to going to the large let's call home and garden stores. We won't use any brand names, but let's as we're developing local seeds, I think it's also great if we can develop kind of a local seedling operation as well for folks that just want to get their seedlings that are acclimated to the area.
That was something we just started doing a couple of months ago. We actually, due to COVID, the demand was there, and I just saw so many people not knowing what they were doing and going and buying stuff that's never going to grow here. And they're taking that seed from somebody who could potentially grow it where it could work.
Right.
So that was kind of frustrating. So we did start, me and 3 other growers in the area are growing out seedlings. We're not exclusively using our own saved seed for all of it. Some of it we do, but just making the right plants available at the right time of year.
Well, and as your network begins to develop, you'll have more and more local seeds, and hence more and more local seedlings as well. What we're talking about, these kinds of projects, tie in with really an idea and a cultural movement that's agrarianism. The term for it is agrarianism. The work of Wendell Berry, the great American agrarian, kind of celebrates the ideal of agrarianism and is working still to this day to try to establish that. Elise, are you familiar with agrarianism as a concept? And do you see your work? I see what you're doing directly related to agrarianism. The urban harvest is really an urban agrarian kind of operation. But did you have any engagement with agrarianism as a movement, or have you given any thought to how your work directly relates to that?
Yeah, so I do think that it's kind of like a modern day take on agrarianism, maybe. My role, I think, or where at least I'm filling people's needs at this point, is sparking the interest and that slight bit of knowledge. So I just encourage anybody and everybody I can to grow something. And I think that that is slowly tying or closing that gap that we have from maybe true agrarianism. But I think that a lot of people have limiting beliefs about growing in the city, or because they haven't grown food in the past, that you have to be a full-time farmer to be able to support your own, your own family, whatever. So in my role right now, I'm really just trying to lead by example and show people that even growing, Kyndra and I were talking, she said, well, all I have is herbs. That's something. And there's a lot of people that don't grow anything, anything that you can get. Not only is it important for knowledge and learning for down the road if you ever did want to grow more of your own food, but it also it's a huge the nutrients in our food is just, that's what really got me started growing a ton of my own food, is the lack of nutrients in our industrial agriculture system. And so even just harvesting a small amount of food to put on your table each day is going to give you all the vitamins, like that can be your vitamins. It can bring health to your family. So that's really where I try to focus, is even if it's just a little bit, it's something.
The point that you make is exactly right. Even if you grow one thing, even if you're just growing some herbs, or you're lucky enough to get a tomato plant to put out some tomatoes for you, or cucumbers or peppers, whatever. There's some crops that are easy to grow, and anybody can do it in a tub, just a gallon tub you can grow food. But anytime we do that, then what we're doing is we're not only improving our health. There's no question about that. The locally grown food is much healthier. Plus, you're harvesting it fresh, so all the nutrients are still in there. Even organic foods that are shipped in from the average distance food travels is 1,500 miles. Well, in that course of time, even organic foods are going to lose their nutritional value. But that pepper off of your own plant is going to have all of that. Or the eggplant, we just harvested some eggplant. I should bring that in and just put it up on the screen to show you. We've got some beautiful Casper eggplants just the other day.
Oh, I love Casper. I've grown that variety.
And they're beautiful too, aren't they? They just work.
They are. It's just that you don't expect the white. It's just like people look and they're like, what is that?
Yeah, I know. But that's part of your education too, though. That's what you share with people, because you're growing it, they can see it. And then at least you can either go in your YouTube video or show them a picture of it, and they're amazed by it. And then you can say, I can grow that too. But I do think that for folks that are either advocates or engaged in the foods improvement of the food system, they really need to grow a little bit. And I'm going to switch gears a little bit and use that as a bridge to kind of a reflection on food insecurity and how what you're doing is a response to food insecurity. Because what we've observed, and Kyndra, we have that article up there that I wrote about food insecurity. I think
Yes, we do.
that, and this is still true to this day, there are tens of thousands, probably 100,000 or more people that are relying on food banks right now for food. And you've seen the images of the miles and miles of cars backed up at food distribution points. Every one of those persons in those cars is food insecure, if not, in fact, just downright hungry. The food that they're receiving is industrial food. It's coming from the industrial food system. And for the most part, with all due respect and compassion for those that are getting that food, it's not nutritionally rich. It's not nutritionally dense. It's just, for the most part, excess food from the industrial food system. Thank God we have it, and thank goodness those people are able to get it. However, projects like Elise's The Urban Harvest are a way of directly responding to the food insecurity crisis through educating people on how to grow their own food, for sure, but also encouraging people to begin thinking that way about the sources of their food. And Elise, do you want to pick up on that a little bit about how your work kind of is a response to the massive food insecurity that we're seeing now as a result of COVID, but kind of the residual base level food insecurity that's running at between 10 and 15% of the population. Even before COVID, 10 to 15% of the American population were food insecure, which is defined as not being certain about where your nutrition is going to come from. So I see, in the little bit that I know about your work, there's a direct response to that, but I'm looking if you could share anything further about how you consciously envision your work in the context of this crisis.
Yeah, so I think that this crisis was a wake-up call for a lot of people, and it showed just how finely balanced, I mean, on a thread, our food system is. And it also, I think, brought to light how many insecure families there are, because when a kid can go to school and get their breakfast and get their lunch, maybe they don't get dinner, but they got their meals, you know, and then that got taken away. What about all those children, you know? So I think that even though this has been an issue the entire time, having to change how they were getting their food brought it to light for a lot of people and showed them just how many people there were. I mean, and it's not even just food insecure. There are hungry people in our country. We think we're first world and we don't have those kinds of problems, and that is not the case at all. Right here in St. Pete, we have food deserts. I was lucky enough to work with Will Allen up in Milwaukee. He was in a massive food desert. And he started growing food, and he had the kids come and he had the kids learn how to grow their food. And that's something that I took to heart when I was working with him, was showing people how to grow their food and how that can shift food insecurity, because it almost goes back to what we were talking about, that for-profit, that not-for-profit model that I was talking about in the beginning. When we have food insecurity, giving them, you know, money via SNAP or WIC, or giving them food isn't helping solve their problem.
Right.
And it, you know, there are a lot of things working against this socioeconomic class. And I think that instead of giving handouts, I think we should be giving knowledge. And with that, maybe how to get started and stuff to get started with. I'm not saying that there's no need or there's no place to bridge that gap, but I think to truly fix the problem or to help alleviate the problem, we need to be giving them the knowledge for what to eat and how to cook and how to grow their own food. And I think those are all really important issues. Something I've noticed a lot, and it's not even just food insecure, but a lot of people don't know how to cook fresh food anymore. It's like mind-blowing to them. They'll grow something like an eggplant even, and they say, what do I do with it now?
Yeah.
Like, and so, you know, no matter who you are, where you are in your needs, there are huge information gaps, and that's where I am trying to bridge, is with knowledge and giving them the expertise they need to take care of themselves.
Well, kudos to you on that, Elise. And I think many of us in the Florida Food Policy Council, as well as like folks that are engaged in trying to improve the Florida foodways and the Florida food system in general, are right on the same page with you. The challenge that I think we're all wrestling with is that bridge. The observations that you make, which we underscore and affirm as well, is we have a lack of understanding about how to grow our own food. Seasonal foods, for example, soil conditions, just what it takes to do. We've got that challenge. Then we have the other challenge, which is as great, which is knowing how to prepare the food that we grow. Collards, for example, are a Southern staple. They have been forever. And yet today, many people don't know how to prepare collards. You can eat them raw. Yeah, that's true. But there's so many great recipes for preparing them, but you have to know how to work with them. Eggplant, that's a great example. I guess this is like the eggplant segment of Florida food. We're talking about, and we're talking about it because they're coming in right now, and I think we're seeing the eggplant. But how do you prepare an eggplant? Well, if you've not worked with it, if there's no inherited knowledge, if you didn't have a mom or a dad that knew how to prepare it, then you're just left, literally holding the eggplant and saying, what do I do with this? And there's these enormous gaps. Wendell Berry, to go back to the great agrarian again, Wendell Berry has a famous quote. It was on the Diane Rehm show years ago. He said, this culture has had the costly luxury of living 2 generations ignorant of the sources of our existence. We've lived 2 generations ignorant of the sources of our existence, meaning where does our food come from? Where does our water come from? Where does our substance come from? Where does our clothing come from? Where do all the elements that are most necessary for our existence come from? We don't know those sources. We've lost them. And by losing them, then we've lost touch with the natural environment, to be sure, but we've also lost touch with our predecessors, our ancestors, the people that have come before it, that were the source of this knowledge. It just all kind of cut off. It all ended in the 1950s and the 1960s. And folks like you and I'm a little bit older than you, I think, but folks like you and I are kind of in a position now where it's all come into our generation, our time on Earth, to try to refamiliarize, re-educate folks about these systems, about how to grow, how to cook, what's necessary to be involved in it. At the same time that we're faced with this tidal wave, this tsunami of industrial food and an industrial system that has programmed the consciousness, the way people think about food. So in a way, we're really up against it. But the work that you're doing, the work that many in the Florida Food Policy Council are doing, the work that we're doing at USF with the Urban Food Sovereignty Group, and many of the other groups and individuals, we're all doing bits and pieces to try to make this better. The question that I would have, and I'm just inviting you to think more broadly with me and our listeners and viewers, is how do we build that bridge in a sustained and substantial manner? And we're doing something, I'm doing something, you're doing something, there's small scale work that's going on, there's no question about it. But how can we ramp that up? What would be necessary to do it? And I pose this question now because I'm making another little transition in our Florida Food Dialogue, and that's the policy. What do you
I'm going to take a walk just so hopefully the mower, I'm listening, but I don't want it to be too loud for everybody.
Yeah, I like
go ahead. I'm sorry.
I like the action shot. And we can see that you're right in the middle of an urban environment there, which we like very much. We see the residential areas, we see the vehicles, we know that this is an urban environment. So the question before us is, how do we make that transition from what many of us are doing individually and on a small scale, either as an LLC, a for-profit operation, or a not-for-profit organization, or something that's going on through a school, or just through somebody doing backyard gardening. What do you see as the steps that are necessary to move from these kind of small and diverse operations to something that can literally turn the tide, that can stem the tide of our reliance on an industrial food system that's just swamping the entire culture, as well as, in a certain extent, overwhelming our efforts to try to restore a sustainable food system?
Yeah, so I think that something that I learned myself, and I think that is something that it sounds like you're very passionate. I am very passionate about getting people growing, but I think that it's important to acknowledge that until they're ready to accept the information, we can give them all of the material that they need to succeed, and until they choose to act on it, it's probably not going to happen. But with that being said, I do think that the need is, it's not going to be a choice much longer. I think
Right.
that we are getting to a point in society where our health and the food system as a whole is not going to last much longer, right? We're at what, 60 harvests until all of the topsoil is depleted.
Right.
You know, our children, I have a young daughter. She is now expected to live 5 years less than me.
Yeah.
That makes me cringe because of our food system. So I don't think people are going to have a choice much longer, but
Right.
until that is forced upon them, they are going to have to choose to take on this knowledge and take on a role in this food system and in our local food systems. I'd also say to that, from a business perspective, I think that putting as much information out there online as possible is really big. I took it as a personal thing for me when I started doing the YouTube channel. I didn't want to do it. I resisted it, and I realized that it's not about me. It doesn't matter if I'm not comfortable sitting on a computer and talking to people I've never seen before. I need to do it because the information is worth sharing. So if you have an operation, if you have knowledge to share, I think that you need to try to get it out there to as many people. And oftentimes that's, doing Zoom classes, or, sharing on social media, or doing something on YouTube. Those are all free tools that you can use to reach more people. So I think that is something that's an important tool for us as we try to branch out and reach more people. One person only has so much time, so many, classrooms they can teach in. But when you take it to that next element, you can reach so many more people.
Yeah, agreed. I want to also put out there in our conversation, and also for the listeners, the importance of getting started where you are with the tools that you have, whatever they may be, even if it's small scale, even if it's just growing one plant, even if it's only going to the farmer's market to get locally grown food. Take that step. Come on, get involved. Take that step. One person doing one thing is at least a step in the right direction. And I think at least, I can speak for myself and maybe for Elise, but I know for many other growers and many other people that are active in the system, usually that first step is the first of many. It truly
Absolutely.
is just the first step, and you'll find that you grow more food, or you go to the farmer's market more often, or you take one of Elise's online classes, or you buy the seeds from her, or you get deeper and deeper involved in it. But unless you can take that step, then nothing's going to happen. You're going to still be relying on a system that is not really working for your benefit or for your health. So I want to encourage everyone to take that first step and then be ready to take the next step. And there will be people ready to help you.
Yes.
That will extend a hand to you. At least Florida Food Forum, Florida Food Policy Council, the Urban Sovereignty Group, there's many groups, there's many individuals. We're out there, we're here, and we can affect the change. We can bring about the change. The more of us that are involved, and the more links we have, the more connections we have with what's going on, the stronger the work will be.
Yeah, I think to speak to that, I think that a gardening community is very strong. I think just by having that connection to growing and the lands and everything else, it just creates an atmosphere and understanding and an interconnectedness. And so I think gardening is really a lot about community. You were speaking about seed banks. Like, I would never be able to grow enough seed for all of the different crops to save seed and share seed. So, you have a network of friends and you all share each other's seeds, because then you all, grow that, one person grows that extra bed of broccoli and one
Right.
to go to seed, and so that community is essential to gardening. And it's also just innate in gardeners, I think. So once you get plugged into those communities, there's SUAC, there's community gardens all over the place. There's the Food Policy Council, there's the schools and everything. There's just so much going on, and I've been doing this for not ever, but like a long time, and I still am constantly meeting new people.
Yeah.
Newport Richie, like, I mean, we're around the corner from each other. How
Right.
have we not really gotten to know each other?
Right.
You know, so
Yeah.
it just, the more we talk and the more we share and the more we network and build community, I think the bigger this will be.
That's, of course, the vision of the Florida Food Policy Council. It's obviously a statewide organization, but it also is, understands the state as a collection of regions. So we're also working to try to facilitate the contacts within the regions. Very much like what we're doing now. You and I happen to live relatively close to each other, so there's a lot of conversation that we can have here, but that's just the start of it. The same kinds of conversations can be going on in Alachua County, up where you went to school, right? Or up in Tallahassee or down in Miami. All of these areas of the state have projects going on that are similar to what you're doing, what I'm doing, what's happening at the University of South Florida. Other universities have similar hubs where projects are being done. Reach out, look around, and those that may be listening to our broadcast are also encouraged to check Florida Food Policy Council website to find organizations and groups in your area that you can get involved in. Some of them are active growers, some of them are educators, some of them are civic activists that are working to change policy and engage in statewide, countywide, municipal activities to actually change policies, so it's easier to get done the sorts of things that Elise and others are doing. Other folks can get you in touch with farmers markets where you can go and support the local farmers that are doing this work. Others can get you in touch with a small scale markets that have a commitment to local agriculture here in our community. Just to give a plug to another local group, Wright's Market in Newport Richie has a commitment to buy first from the local grower. They buy first from the local grower, whether it's sweet potatoes that right now they're coming in, or eggplant, or whatever's in season, they're going to buy first from us. That means that when you go to that store, you're supporting the local farmer, but you're also supporting the local market. So find the connections, work to find the connections, and then get involved in those connections, either large or small. At least, just as a matter of record, and just so people know a little bit more about you and your work, you are a graduate of the University of Florida.
Yep.
And fine school. And what was your degree in? What did you study before you became a urban horticulturalist and food celebrant?
Yeah, so my degree was in Wildlife Ecology and Conservation with a minor in Zoology.
Okay.
So I was in College of Agricultural and Life Sciences, but I was not directly in ag, which honestly I'm kind of happy about, because I was able to take my own perspective on the food system and not have somebody tell me or train me in that way. So I kind of learned more of like grassroots methods maybe, but it definitely gave me the ecological understanding of soil and animals in relation to plants, and all of the foundational knowledge that's really important as a gardener.
Yeah, I appreciate that very much. What are your thoughts about, or what is your experience with IFAS and the local state extension office?
Yeah, so I think that they can provide some pretty valuable resources to people, especially when you're first starting out. The soil test there is a quick way to judge how your soil is doing. Whether you take the amendments they recommend or not, it at least gives you a starting point to work with. I get my compost tested every couple of years just to make sure things are still fine-tuned, That's a nice resource, and it's very reasonably cost because it's through, I think it's like $8 or something plus shipping.
Right.
It's real cheap. And then
let me interrupt for 1 second.
Sure.
Now, when you say you get it tested, now is that the system where you take sections of your garden and send it then into state of Florida, or you have?
Yep.
That's the method you're talking about. It's not like teams coming out and actually.
No. I do my own samples. You take, I think it's 3 or 4 different shovelfuls, mix it in a bucket, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Right. And I want to also encourage anyone that's growing locally to use that method also. Every couple of years, send it in. It doesn't cost very much. It's easy to do.
Yep. That's a really good starting point. I also think that it can be helpful if you buy a new house and you're trying to identify, what you want to keep, what you want to get rid of. You can send in pictures of pests, of trees that you can't identify, of fungus that's on your plants. And if you're not plugged into somebody locally, or if you're not in a gardening club or a gardening group, you don't know who to ask them. That's what they're there for. And they have the extension office in each county. So a lot of times they're really fine tuned to that area. Not always, some of them have their specialties and they might want to do ornamentals and not food as much, or might not have that knowledge base, but it's still going to be a heck of a lot better than, an online search that tells you have, God knows what rare disease on your plants and you need to burn the whole thing, so
Yeah.
It's at least a good starting point.
What about, you're growing right now, you said mostly for your home and your family, and also obviously for seeds, for the seed collection. What about animals on the property? Do you have a diversity of animals, or is it just like many other urban environments where it's like a dog or a cat?
So I do have my dog you've seen wandering in and out of the video,
Yeah.
whining for the AC. I also have chickens. I do backyard chicken keeping,
Okay.
and I also do vermicomposting. So I don't do an active system like most people do. I do a pretty passive system. I feed them my compost, but
Right.
I absolutely call them livestock on the farm. It's fertilizer made
Sure.
in-house.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I have them, and that's the extent of it for now, but I am on a very, very small urban lot. So
Yeah.
I was contemplating a goat. My husband put his foot down, so.
Nothing wrong with that. I love the idea, like a pygmy goat.
Yeah.
That comes up a lot, by the way, in folks that actually have small scale urban agriculture operations going on, urban farms or gardens, is the goat, the issue of the small pygmy goat. Why not?
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
I will get.
It
I will
is,
get
and
into
it's a good source for, dairy or whatever. So like, I clearly am not self-sufficient. I probably never will be on such a small space. I do eat meat, and that's part of my diet. So for me to expect to produce that on site is not going to happen. But every little thing counts. So like if you have the chickens for the eggs, or the goat for the milk, or the that all still helps, and it all still goes to that ultimate goal.
How about insects? Do you have any challenges with insects that, well, let's call them undesirable insects?
Yeah, so I go with the integrative pest management approach. I really try to, IPM, integrative pest management, is when you create systems within your environment that support each other. So it's all about keeping beneficial insects there and keeping a natural balance with things. And it's tough because a lot of gardeners that I'm helping are just getting started. They may not have a very robust system where they have beneficials in the area.
Right.
So if in my own garden, that's pretty much what I rely on. I don't do treatment. I might hand pick some stuff. On a very rare occasion, I might use some soapy water.
Yeah.
But I also do help. To me, I would rather help somebody achieve a harvest than say, don't do anything, don't spray anything, don't let it, because then they may fail, So I do help people with organic methods, sustainable methods as much as possible, very targeted treatments, so that hopefully that balance will develop in their system. But as much as possible, I really preach taking a step back and letting things do their natural process.
I'm not surprised to hear you say that, and I'm delighted that you have mentioned that publicly. That's our approach too. Our gardens, the ones that our community in Newport Richey are involved in, the no-kill garden. That we make a big point of that. We're not going to kill creatures in there, especially dogs. No, we're not going to. And we've had some disputes about that. We let the old Florida lovers come in. You may be familiar with them. They're the really big grasshoppers. We let them come in and munch if they want to, rather than killing them. And that has caused a little bit of tension. But I'm a great believer in letting the natural cycles take care of themselves. And if we're growing in harmony with the natural cycles, then we'll see the beneficial insects that will take care of the undesirable insects. But the undesirable insects are undesirable only to our consciousness, only to our view. They live here too. It's part of their world. And if we're going to have a healthy ecosystem, we have to welcome them as well.
What about the ladybugs eating, and the lizards or the bats and everything else? They need something to eat. Those lubbers, though, they're tricky. I mean, since they're toxic, there's nothing that eats them around here, so those are hard to stomach. But they're so seasonal that if you just, they're going to be gone soon.
Yes,
That's what I tell people. Just wait, they'll be gone soon.
My thought always, the lubbers are a great test case. And my thought on the lubbers is just, I don't know if Kyndra's going to keep this in our tape or not, but I'm just going to put it out there. Those lubbers were there long before we were here. They've lived here for millennia before we showed up. They're a natural native creature that lives in this area. And there's a part of me that says, who am I to work to kill those guys? Let them eat I'll give them a pepper now and then. I'll let them eat a little bit of the plant. It's okay with them. But you're right. Nothing else will eat them as far as I know.
Nope. I didn't know any better when I first got chickens. I don't know how many years ago, a decade ago or something like that. And I had a few and I tossed them into the chickens to give them some extra protein. And they looked at me like,
get them out of here.
What are you trying to do to me? And I looked up afterwards and I was like, oh,
the chickens knew right away.
Oh no, they knew. There was no doubt. They all just looked at me and nope, not going to happen. But
there's in Louisiana, they call those guys the devil's horses. I think something like Chevalier Diablo or something like that. The devil's horse, because they're scary looking too. Well, what a wonderful time we've had. Kyndra, do you have any thoughts, questions, or ideas that you wanted to share with Elise for purposes of the Florida Food Policy Council? Kyndra Love is the executive administrator of the Florida Food Policy Council, and we wouldn't be able to do these events without her, but she's also an activist in terms of the Florida food system. So Kyndra, if you want to weigh in and share a thought or comment.
So I do actually have two questions for Elise. The first question I have, and of course I always go to this, is what can young people do to get more involved? Sometimes really growing when you don't have access can be a little bit foreign. It can seem a little bit difficult to get started. So of course, I know your website is a great resource to go to, but do you have any recommendations for younger people or just, people in general who want to get started, but they feel a little bit afraid of approaching this new world of growing?
Yeah. So I would just say, just as Dell said earlier, just start. Go with the, ready, fire, aim approach. Grab, an old bucket that's laying in your garage, drill some holes in it, and put some soil in it. And if you're not sure what to plant, try to find a garden or a local club and get some starts from them. If you absolutely have to, go to big box stores, although I do not recommend that very much, considering the fact that they all just pulled the seeds off the shelves here. It's prime season now, and they won't put them back out till spring. Anyhow, sorry, side tangent, but just grow something, I think, is the best thing you can do. And also, if you are a parent, or if you have grandchildren, or even the kids down the street, getting children involved in growing food and seeing where it comes from, it can be kind of stressful. I mean, I do this for a living and love it and wouldn't want it any other way. But when my daughter was a toddler and didn't understand the concept, I'd plant something and come back 2 seconds later and it'd be dug up. Or she was making stone soup the other day and pulled out half my basil plant. It can be, but that's something she's going to remember. She knows all of the herbs in our garden. When we have friends come over, she's not even 3 yet. She will walk them around. This is okra. This is loofah. And she knows. And she knows when it's hot, this is what we grow. And now that it's getting cool, this is what we grow. She helps me plant seeds. And so getting children involved and getting them that connection, that's something that they'll, even if they don't necessarily do it when they're, teens and too cool for it, or, busy with college, if they have that connection from when they were a child, maybe, just maybe, they'll go back to it when they're ready.
Thank you. And my second question really has to do with policy. So I'm curious, when you first started, if you came upon any policy challenges, or as you've been doing your work now, if there are any policy recommendations or some things that you would like to see that might help you in the future do what you do better.
I didn't have too many hiccups or anything for starting out, although when I did try to get my business bank account, I told them I was a farmer. I was doing the commercial farming at that time. And I had to fight tooth and nail to convince them that I was not growing marijuana. If you're a farmer, apparently that's all you grow. And I had to prove, I had to bring in documentation, photographs of the produce that which I just thought was the silliest thing in the world. But that was a little bit interesting when I was trying to get that done. But currently, I think that one of the biggest frustrations I see is in the food waste and trying to the amount of, it's 40% of our food is wasted, right? And it just goes in, and some of it's laying fallow in the fields, especially after COVID. They were turning their fields under because there were people hungry, and they were turning their fields under because they're used to selling to restaurants and distributing through these mass product. So that components is just something, because I really focus a lot on composting and building soil, and I've started collecting, so there's a local food bank, and they take the stuff from the grocery store and they give it to people in need in our community. They can't give it away quick enough. So then I take it, I feed it to my chickens. Half of it, I'll salvage. I don't care if there's some, bumps and bruises. I'll eat what I can. And then what's left, I compost and I turn into soil instead of it going to a landfill and turning, the emissions. It's just that there's got to be a way to close the loop on that system and keep more of that. One, ultimately, ideally, of course, would be to reduce the food waste, but also to create more efficient uses for that product.
Excellent policy recommendation. There are parts of the country that actually have curbside composting. San Francisco is one that I know of, and I know there's others as well. When you put out your garbage or you put out your recycling, you put out your food waste. There's a special container for it. They pick it up and then they compost. So that's a public policy that more cities should have. We should all have that. Yes, well, it was great having you on, and we celebrate your work. We commend you. We applaud you, as we always do. And we do want to remind everyone that's listening that a link to the urban harvest is on the Florida Food Policy Council website. You can find out more about Elise's work, and you can support her work, and you can even acquire materials from her just by going to our website. You'll find her website there. So please do that. Please support Elise and all of our local growers and local food activists. It makes a difference. It's how we change the world. It's how we make a better food system. So thank you, Elise, on behalf of the Florida Food Policy Council and on all of us that are supporting your work. We celebrate you and we appreciate you.
Thank you for building this community. It's wonderful.
You're right with you.
Thanks for having me on.
All right. Bye now.
Have a good one.
Thank you.